Welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. If you're a longtime Houstonian, you've likely seen the effects of gentrification. Neighborhoods like Acres Home, Freedmanstown, and Piney Point have drastically changed over the years, but there are new efforts to slow the process down. The Houston City Council has voted to approve conservation districts in 5 Houston communities. Joining me here now on The Factor Uncensored to talk about it, City Councilman Michael Kubash and City Council Member Tiffany D. Thomas. Glad to have you here both. So for those who don't know what conservation districts are, what are those and how will it help these communities? I think about a half dozen, right?
Absolutely. The intention was really to account for the fact that many of the freedmen's towns that were founded in the city of Houston, remnants remain. And so this was just one tool.
And for those who don't know what freedmen's towns are.
Absolutely. Good teachable moment. 1865, when formerly enslaved people were free. They created these communities in search of liberty and justice and freedom and justice for all, especially for themselves, where they created cemeteries, churches, and neighborhoods where they can be safe. Because Houston in the past has had a history of poor planning policies, we love to tear things down and not preserve history. The conservation district is a point in the right direction to retain what currently exists, to hold the heritage, and also make sure that we don't point to 20 years from now and say there used to be an Acres Home, there used to be a Piney Point. And so this was an effort to give communities another tool for them to advocate for themselves. And one of the significant pieces about conservation districts, the neighborhoods have to choose on how they want to design what that looks like in their community, because we all know there's no monopoly on being black and having black communities. They're all distinct, they're all different. So Wednesday's vote was a point in the right direction.
And Councilman Kubash, how active will residents in those communities, why was that an important factor to have in the ordinance that you guys passed Wednesday?
Well, first, when it first came up, I tagged it to give it another week so that I could look into why were those 6 communities selected. There was other communities like South Park that had called me and said, well, why were we left out? So I wanted to pause so I could see, because as you know, when you pass a law or an ordinance, there's unintended consequences that may not be seen for many years. And that's what I was asking.
And what were you able to gather in your research?
Well, what I found out was that many of the communities had really actively sought for it, like Freedmanstown. They had showed us a graph of the vote that took place at one of the town hall meetings. And when you look back at Independent Heights, which is probably one of the oldest black settlements in the United States, or in Texas anyway, there was a need for that. They had came out in 2010 wanting to do something, and here it is 2023. And so just because I tagged it didn't mean I was against it, because I eventually voted for it.
You weren't the evil white man, were you?
We got him to make sure that vote was a yes. He's sitting next to me, so we closed that deal.
Let me say this about our council member. When she addresses an issue, she is very knowledgeable. It's like me listening to my college professor laying things out, and sometimes I just look back at her and she knows I do.
And really quick, let's give a small example. If a developer wants to come into Independence Heights or Freedmanstown or some of the other designated areas and say, we want to build condos, $500,000 to $1 million condos, what say will the residents have in that?
Well, first of all, most of the neighborhoods, the pilot neighborhoods, have deed restrictions. So some of the deed restrictions are going to already limit that type of development. However, there was a compromise between the developers and the pilot program. What we do realize is that neighborhoods want to retain their fabric. And so it's not that we don't want new development to come into these neighborhoods. New development is a form of revitalization. However, what we're asking developers to consider is the fabric in the neighborhood and retaining those wood frame homes, where you don't have a 3-story townhome overlooking a wood frame home of a ranch style. And so what the community will be able to decide is really design features around where the garage goes, fence height, and other things that they can ultimately change. And there's a menu of items because all of them are different. When you look at Independence Heights to Piney Point to Acre Home, they're all significant.
Setbacks as well.
Setbacks as well. And so there's flexibility in that. And one of the things that we asked the administration to do was to look at the pilot program. And he was willing to do that so we can come back a year later and say, how effective is this, and our neighborhoods actually getting what they deserve.
All right. We want to thank you both, Michael Kubas, Tiffany Thomas. Thank you both for joining us here on The Factor Uncensored, and keep us updated.